Today on CityCast Chicago, big closures are happening across the city. The attack ads are picking up as we close in on primary day, and Amazon drones are coming to the suburbs, y'all. It's Wednesday, March 4th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I've got executive producer Simone Alicea back in the building 2 days in a row. How you feeling today, my friend?
Hey, I'm okay, Jacoby. Waiting for the listeners to get tired of me here.
That's not going to happen. Get into the comments, Simone. They love you. They want to hear from you more often. Simone, we're going to start this story with 3 different closures that are happening across the city. And it's not just those seasonal restaurant closures, which we're always tracking. We've got a cleaners on the south side, a north side museum, and some schools on the northwest side. Let's start with the Aspira network.
Yeah, so that is a charter school network. And if this story is sounding familiar about some charter schools closing in Chicago, this is kind of a trend now that is happening. Mm-hmm. I think what's different about this is, number one, these campuses are slated to close now, like mid-year. CPS is basically advising families and students to, start thinking about transferring before the last quarter of the year, which, would be starting relatively soon here. This is pretty remarkable. A mid-year closure like this is super disruptive. And the reason and in this case too, it's a little bit different because when we've talked about the Acero schools, right, which I think was the other big one. Mm-hmm. That was a situation where the network, the charter school network, which, as a reminder, charter schools are schools that are publicly funded by tax dollars, but they are privately operated. So in the Acero case, the network sort of made a business decision to close those schools. They were like, we kind of can't make this work. We're going to close them. And CPS kind of had to respond. In this case, CPS is basically directing the closure here. They say that Aspira has mismanaged their finances, has failed to provide some audits that they're requiring. And as a result, that essentially as part of their sort of like regulatory authority over these schools that they need to close.
CPS had provided about $2.5 million in advances to help Aspira make payroll going back to November. And they say coming up in April is a state mandated funding cap, which means they're not going to be able to keep providing more money for them to pay the bills, and as such are going to start the transfer process for 500 plus students.
Yeah. And, Aspira, for their part, they say that the district is chronically underfunding charter schools writ large. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like weird math in the formula of like how charter schools get the funding and what percentage of funding. They're funded very much based on enrollment. The district, for its district-run schools, has sort of started to move away from like a very strict per pupil formula in terms of funding, but the charter schools are still beholden to that. And so Aspira argues that, if there are financial issues, it's because of underfunding by CPS. And again, CPS, for their part, is saying that we know we've given you the money, we've had money there, you have mismanaged it. Again, caught in the middle of this in terms of like, what kinds of regulatory framework should CPS be engaged in, how much funding charter schools get, or how should they be using it, is you have students and families, right, who fundamentally their learning is, going to be interrupted. They may have to, their travel may be, right? There are already students who are already traveling to get to these schools that may not live in these neighborhoods. I think, there are just a lot of questions. They want to know, how are their credits going to transfer? Are they still going to play spring sports? Are they, right? Like, it is hugely disruptive. And again, CPS says, we're going to help you. We're going to, make all these transitions necessary. We're going to neighborhood schools that can absorb these students, et cetera, et cetera. But again, if you're one of those students, like this sucks, right? Yeah. It absolutely sucks.
I transferred high schools mid-semester my sophomore year for my own financial reasons. And I was at a school for a few weeks, and to this day, I still think about how disruptive that was, how it really changed really how I showed up at school for a couple of months. Like, I know none of the kids there. It was a complete culture shock. And some of the families talk about what it means to be closing two primarily Latino schools right now, and what it means for these families who typically, when you're transferring in the middle of the school year, the family has to really lead that charge, has to reach out to the new school. And so, families are wondering, how exactly is CPS going to help with this transition? In addition to that, there are 60 plus unionized staff members who work here. And CTU is wondering, how is CPS going to transfer some of those people across the district and welcome some of those staff members into new schools? So this is, like you said, we've talked about this, now seems like a trend of charter schools in the city coming to CPS hoping to be financially saved, and CPS having to make some decisions to keep schools open, some decisions to shutter these schools. And but this does seem like potentially one of the most dramatic cases we've seen to date.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be, I think of the closures we're going to talk about today, this is the one that is sort of the most, it's just sort of immediate kind of dramatic impact on the folks affected. But sort of staying in education, let's talk about the DePaul Art Museum.
Yeah.
That closure was announced, I think, late last week. Pretty surprising, I think, to a lot of people. That museum located right next to the Fullerton CTA stop. I have passed by it. I don't countless times, as I've made my way around. And it's interesting because it's one of those places that I pass by all the time. And every time I pass by it and I see the art that you can see just from the window, from the street, I'm always like, man, that is so cool that this university has an art museum, and it looks like there's some really interesting stuff in there. I should make a point of going there. And then I never do. I was reading about some of the stuff in that collection, Andy Warhol, Dawood Bey, Paul D'Amato, they have a collection of West African objects and Latino art too. It sounds like there's some pretty precious stuff there that now will no longer be displayed, at least there.
Yeah, right now it's slated to close in June. And I will say, this is one of those art museums that is very personally important to me. Like, when I first got back to the city in 2015, I was working for an education company, and essentially my job was to go around to schools across the city, and DePaul was one of my schools. And so I spent a lot of time in their art museum. And in addition to working there as a consultant, then when I started teaching, DePaul was one of my first campuses that I went back to teaching communications at. And so I spent a lot of time writing stories, practicing stories, walking through that museum. And it, like so many of the smaller museums in the city, punches so far above its weight class. Some of the exhibits that are currently there, like dedications to the Young Lord, to exhibitions I've seen over the years, have been really meaningful. And so, again, I spent a lot of time there throughout my career, my artistic journey. And so it really sucks to see that, again, a conversation we were having a couple of months ago, the impact of dwindling enrollment at universities across the city. How are they impacting student experience? How are they impacting the campuses? And here are one of those consequences, because the university is saying, due to dwindling international graduate school enrollments, they've already had to recently make cuts to faculty and staff, over 100 people in the last couple of months. And so, again, this is one of those consequences. And I know a lot of people ain't gonna be happy with this, in addition to the fact that, they're about to start construction on a huge athletic facility right on campus that was a huge back and forth for years about the fate of some historic buildings on campus. And so you got so much going on that sort of intersect in this story. And I wonder if the pressure from the community, students, makes the university reverse course on this decision, again, especially with the multi-million-dollar renovation about to take place.
Well, talk about pressure, right? Over the weekend, 6 faculty members, published a letter essentially urging the university not to go through with this closure. And, 1,500 students, faculty, staff, and alumni have since added their name to that letter. So there is a lot writing on this. The last closure I want to talk about is Pride Cleaners on 79th and St. Lawrence. And the first time I heard about this, the heard about this spot was when sometimes architecture critic Lee Bay was on the show, and I think we asked him maybe outright, like, what's your favorite building, or, you know, one of the most underrated buildings or something like that. And this is the building that he mentioned was this dry cleaners here in Chatham, because it has this sort of like mid-century kind of space race era like parabolic roof thing. It's got this cool sign like Pride, like it is straight out of it was built in 1959 and sort of straight out of that era. And it's a beautiful piece. And they announced that after 67 years that the Cleaners is closing. No one likes to see a local business go out, but that building in particular, because it's not landmarked, it doesn't currently have any, you know, kind of protections around its architecture. Its fate is pretty unclear, and we have no idea kind of what its owners, how they're going to negotiate that or what it's going to do, because there's also kind of an odd the ownership and kind of what has happened over the past couple years has been a bit odd as well.
100%. This is a building I've passed my entire life. It sits like pretty much halfway between 79th and Cottage Grove and 79th and MLK. And I know a lot of people listening, the way you just described the building and the way Lee writes about the building in his book, Southern Exposure, maybe like people like, what the hell is a hyperbolic paraboloid? Essentially, Chicago is largely flat topped, right? Most of our 2-3 flats is just as it's pretty rectangular. It's pretty square and rectangular. But this building, essentially, the roof, the concrete roof, extends from like from the pavement all the way up over the structure, and then sort of shoots out into the parking lot. It's like one beautifully angular building, and the support structure is mostly glass. I was reading in his article, and he said before they put up a fence to prevent it, people used to just like ride their bike up the side of the building. It does look like a ramp. Off the building. It absolutely looks like a ramp. An amazing like skate park edition. It looks so beautiful. And like you said, the sign looks right out of like Soul Train 70s. Like the colors are vibrant. It hasn't been on in years, and the building has seen better days. But in terms of like an unofficial landmark that is a landmark to the neighborhood and to people who have driven by it, the idea that this Cleaners doesn't have a new owner and is likely to shut down and the fate of the building is unknown, it is really deeply troubling.
I gotta say, it does seem primed. Not that I don't know if this is a good idea, but it does seem like the prime spot for like a hip new like burger cocktail bar. Like if this were in
with some like people on roller skates, like delivering out to the
with like a $18 burger though, you know, like
I don't know if they're gonna take it right there down the street from the Burger King.
I don't know, but it has that look about it, right? I don't think that's a good thing. I just feel like if we had a building like this and it was in like Wicker or Logan or West Loop or even like that would be the fate of this building. If someone would turn it into like a fake dive bar.
I could definitely see it being like a retro like burger hot dog restaurant. I could 100% see that. I do think most people who still using it would hope that someone comes in like it. For so many, the building and the Cleaners, they're one and the same, right?
Sure.
For what it's worth, 67 years is a pretty damn good run. But yeah, I would hate to see this building just discarded. And so the local alder says he would like to see it up and running again before they pursue landmark designation. But I mean, like you said, this building it's a building that is often celebrated, not only from Lee, but, you know, Chicago's preservation groups. And so, yeah, my hope is that it gets the landmark designation it deserves over the next couple of years. Access Contemporary Music's Sound of Silent Film Festival is now in its 21st year. And I already know what you're thinking. Kobe, this is an audio medium, and that sound a bit like an oxymoron. Doesn't a silent film festival just sound like this? But here's the thing. This festival features newly composed musical scores performed live, so it's movies and a concert. These silent films were selected from more than 100 submissions to an international call, and they span comedy, drama, experimental, and beyond. Plus, they short. Each one is only about 2 to 15 minutes long. And to top it all off, the festival is at none other than the Music Box Theater, one of my favorite spots in the city and a beautiful setting for this kind of event. The Sound of Silent Film Festival is happening Wednesday, April 8th at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are available at acmusic.org.
Hi, I'm David Plotz. I'm the CEO of CityCast, a podcast network that includes this show you're listening to, and also 12 other CityCasts in 12 other cities. And each one knows their city as well as your local team knows yours. So isn't it time we connected them? Don't you want to know how they're tackling their bike lane problems and housing challenges and sidewalk dog poop crises? That's why I'm hosting a new podcast called Your City Could Be Better. Because it could be. Every week, I'll chat with a different host in our CityCast network about what their cities are doing right and wrong, the weird things they're trying, and the surprising successes, so that we can all learn how to make our cities a little bit better. Listen to Your City Could Be Better on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, from talking about closure to primary day, which is just about 2 weeks away, Simone, the campaign mailers, which we discussed, are picking up. The attack ads are picking up. And some of these races, even the ones that aren't, on primetime television, are starting to get spicy across the city. In fact, one of our listeners reached out to tell us about the one in their area.
Yeah, let's take a listen to that voicemail.
Hey, CityCast. This is James. I live in Albany Park. And the reason I'm calling is I don't know if you've read or heard anything about the primary race for my state assembly district, Illinois State Assembly District 40. But in the past week, things have gotten just really wild out here. The incumbent is Jamie Andrade, been in office for a long time, and his challenger is Miguel Avila Rivera, longtime community organizer. And so the incumbent Jamie's campaign, or I guess the super PACs or whatever that are running these ads, they're sending out all these mailers that show a picture of his opponent and say, this guy is standing with ICE allies, like he's with ICE. The reason I'm bothering to even call you and tell you this is because, I'm Miguel's neighbor. And the reason this is just so insane to me is, on Halloween, we had a series of kidnappings from ICE in our streets, including right on my block, on my street. And I was there when we were tear gassed by ICE, pepper bombed, and they tried to take Miguel's wife off the street and take him out of his car. And he's been helping the entire community with defense against ICE this whole past year and beyond, way back. And so to see mailers going out from a Democratic incumbent to say, hey, look at this guy, he's standing with ICE. That's, I don't know, just turned my stomach.
So the Chicago Tribune actually covered this, and they wrote a really interesting story about it. And thanks, James, for reaching out to us about it, because it's a really interesting story here. So specifically, the mailer sent out by the incumbent, that was State Rep Jamie Andrade, said that some Washington politicians want to expand ICE in our community. Miguel, and this is the challenger, Miguel Alvelo Rivera is standing with them, it says in English, and then Miguel Avelo Rivera supports them, it says in Spanish. Avelo Rivera, who, like I said, is the Democratic challenger in this primary, is the executive director of a worker rights organization called Latino Union of Chicago. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, this sounds like an outright lie. How are you allowed to put an outright lie on an advertisement like this? So the opponent, Alvelo Rivera, is endorsed by Congresswoman Delia Ramirez. So Ramirez has received campaign contributions from two California Democrats, And those two Democrats, they were, again, lawmakers in California, voted in 2024 for a resolution that included funding increases for parts of ICE. Ramirez herself, again, the one who's actually endorsing Avila Rivera, voted against the measure. So,
but Delia took money from people who voted with it. And so we just going to skip over that one and just say 6 degrees of separation. I can connect you to funding for ICE, big dog.
Basically, that's basically the logic there, which I think
weird game of Kevin Bacon.
It's a stretch, right? At best. And, I think it's so interesting because we talked about this, Jacoby, I feel like when we talked about sort of politicians beginning to espouse the abolish ICE slogan. To what degree are people using that as a political cudgel and a political sort of gotcha, particularly in an election season? And to what degree is this actual policy that people espouse, right? And we've seen this in other races too, most notably, I think, in the U.S. Senate race, where you have Juliana Stratton going after Rajna Krishnamurthy, right? Both in debates and in ads and stuff, right? Lots of attack ads flying in that race.
Yeah, Stratton's people said Krishnamurthy represents corporate PACs, MAGA allies, Trump advisors, and ICE contractors. And Krishnamurthy has hit back and saying, especially through your connections with Governor Pritzker, that you yourself have taken a bunch of money from corporate owners and directors. And so it's really a battle of the PAC money and whose money is shadier or more controversial. But yeah, they've also really started to lean into their, in Krishnamurthy's case, abolish Trump's ICE, and in Stratton's case, abolish ICE. And then there's Robin Kelly, who's saying both of them aren't really ready to push the needle as far as she's willing to go. So it's, yeah.
Well, and I think it's so tough too, because I think they take advantage of the ads, sort of capitalize on, people's not necessarily digging into, well, who actually paid for this? Mm-hmm. And not only do you have to answer the question. It's always just like
friends of insert politician.
But not only do you have to answer the question of who actually paid for this, but also like, to what degree are they really connected to whoever they're attacking or building up, right? And like in this case, right, like the chain here, I think, is so far down the line that like the claim on its face definitely seems nonsensical. I think the other thing here is, right, it's one thing for these U.S. Senate candidates who have so much money to be spending on TV ads. They're out here on debate stages talking to each other. There have been several articles written about them. They're getting lots of press because, and I think rightfully so, right, every single voter in the state is going to be voting on this race. But when you have a smaller race like an assembly, a general assembly race in one district, these mailers might be one of the only, if not the only, touch point for voters to get to know these candidates' names and to understand what their message might be. In a race that tends to be, primaries tend to be low turnout, right? It tends to be only the most involved voters. Again, in a district where this race is going to be decided in the primary, like this district is not going to flip Republican in November, as far as any evidence would suggest, right? And so, this kind of stuff really matters in races like this. And so I think it's kind of why it's also kind of worth talking about in a broader way.
Simone, we have spent a lot of time over the last few weeks and months talking about the rise of the machines, from the rapidly expanding quantum campus on the southeast side to the pushback on data centers around the Chicagoland area and broader Illinois, to the presence of autonomous vehicles and a parking garage in downtown Chicago. And now we about to have a conversation about delivery drones making their way into the suburbs. I've been hearing good. Now, this is one, right? I hadn't heard about Waymo until all of this recent reporting. I've heard about these Amazon delivery drones for years now, but I didn't realize we was this close to them maybe being, right outside the city.
Yeah, so Amazon has announced that they are going to be rolling out their drone delivery service in Matson and Markham, where there are also fulfillment centers, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, like you said, it is wild. That does feel like all of a sudden, like 2026 is the year that
Yeah.
like the machines are coming for Chicago. Like we've managed to sort of like, no, we're here in the heartland. That's some coastal stuff. You guys figure that out.
Right, like the delivery robots, I saw them popping up, but even then, I was like, "That's just a little West Loop thing."
That's a
But
West
now
Loop thing. That's
Right.
yeah.
But no, it feels like this is going the way of the scooter and the e-bike. Like one day it was in a couple of neighborhoods, and then all of a sudden it's popping up all over the city in different forms.
The way this will work is, so first of all, the drone program, as you said, already in action in other states: Arizona, Florida, Kansas, Michigan, and Texas. The service was first launched in Texas in 2022, which I will point out areas where there is lots of space, which I think, what, in addition to the proximity to the fulfillment center, right? I think another reason that it's launching in the suburbs rather than in the city is like, these drones needed a lot of space to navigate airspace and land, right? So like they're going to be dropping stuff off, not necessarily on your porch, but potentially in like a backyard, right? Not a whole lot of
You'll
backyards.
get a satellite image of your house, and you'll get to decide where the
drone
old drone touches
should
down.
land. Yeah. Amazon says more than 60% of the items at these fulfillment centers are eligible for drone delivery within an 8-mile radius. The drones can carry multiple packages up to a total of 5 pounds. If you have an order that is heavier than that, you might be getting multiple drones. The flight of these drones is FAA regulated, so there is some level of regulation in terms of the airspace. And the company says that the drones use cameras for safety maneuvers, but that video is not streamed back to Amazon nor stored on the drone, they say.
Yeah, and that Ring camera find your lost pet thing isn't an expansion of the surveillance state. I don't want to hear that nonsense.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think as a concept, drone delivery, I
even just hearing that as a concept, drone delivery, I said it sounds
we're here,
deeply
man.
Militaristic.
I think only because drones have been sort of co-opted, right, by the military. But the idea of a robot sort of in the air delivering your package and maybe taking delivery drivers off the roads, like, is potentially attractive in the sense of like, I think getting more drivers off the roads is like generally a good safety thing. Again, I'm just always skeptical of the robots, of the machines. Like I am skeptical of the company that runs them, right? Like
100%. Like how fast do you need things brought
that's the thing.
to you?
That's the other part of this.
Like, and again, it's sort of like the conversation we had yesterday, the sort of playing advertisers versus ad-free listening. It's like the people who now rely on delivery driving as a job versus these drones versus like, do we need more delivery drivers? And do
we really be needing 2-day delivery?
Is Amazon like? And these things are huge, G.
They're really big. The drones are really big. That's also
hell.
why they're out in these like spacious, like they're really big. Like they're not itty bitty. I am somebody like, I don't use Prime. I don't use Amazon. If I still order stuff on the internet, but I don't use that. And I almost never, I'm almost never looking for something for 2-day delivery because I fundamentally, there's almost never, if I need it that fast, I'll just go out and get it.
You'll go get it.
I'm going to go get it. This kind of my approach. And I also just like question my own urgency when it comes to things that I think I need. But I also like live in a neighborhood where there's a Mariano's down the block, and like I have there's an Ace Hardware a few blocks down from that, and they're like, you know what I mean? Like I have access to things pretty quickly. And so, I'm able to kind of make those decisions, but yeah, that's drones, man. I don't know, man. I don't know if I can take it. I really don't.
No, anything within 8-mile radius, and the packages can only go up to 5 pounds. And they say if you got multiple things, or if it gets over the limit, they'll just send a few drones to your house. So now it's just a swarm of drones making their way to the crib. I don't know. Obviously the video is going to pop up of people sort of following the drone, or people seeing a drone pass over their backyard, or, you know, I'm sure at some point we're going to have video of drones hitting a power line or something. And so it feels like this timing doesn't feel coincidental at all, right? It feels like lawmakers have tried to make Illinois more attractive to these companies, to these pilot programs. But at the same time, to see them questioning this pacing in certain aspects, like the data centers, but then not in terms of, again, the quantum campus, the delivery robots, maybe, you know, mapping the city with these self-driving cars. Right, Illinois' position as not only a site for these Silicon Valley artificial intelligence, quantum computing companies, right, alongside what it means for the consumer on the ground. Like this is a really, I feel like transformational isn't too dramatic to say, a very transformational time in Illinois, it seems, especially given like these things don't exist in states across, like we are still in the early stages of a lot of these companies testing, and the idea that we're an experimentation lab for a lot of this, both on a macro and on a very sort of practical consumer level, is I'm not excited. I'm not excited. I'm very cautious.
I think, you know, it really depends. I think Chicago has always kind of been, you know, I think it was one of Uber and Lyft's early outside of the West Coast.
Makes
it was one of
sense.
the early test markets, right? And, you know, there's a reason for that. We're a major city in the middle of the country. And, you know, it totally makes sense to, on the consumer side, to test some of that stuff here. I think what's happening with quantum is actually kind of different. Is pretty significant in kind of a different way. I think what's happening with quantum, because that is a truly unproven technology. You know, I think with these other things, the technology is there, and we're just testing implementation of that technology and sort of like scalability and like, is it useful to consumers? You know, I think what's happening with quantum is more akin to, you know, early Silicon Valley in computing, is more akin to even, I've been toying around with this comparison in my head to like a Manhattan Project, whereby it is a technology that very, very smart people are trying to figure out how to make it work and make it happen. And then on the side, you have, you know, governments and you know, the financial interests who are like,
Implications for the
yes,
end of the world.
how can we make money, and how can we use this, right? Like, but sort of the technology, the finding of the technology itself is still in that stage of like trying to actually like make it happen. And that's why on some level you can understand why someone like JB Pritzker would be really excited to kind of like bring that knowledge to Illinois, because we kind of missed the boat on the first round of the computing riches, right? We never really became kind of that tech hub, that development hub in the same way that some of these other places were able to.
It's a very good point. And I do think, I love the example you put of like sort of being early for Uber and Lyft, and seeing how the gig economy and that transformation and its relationship to these companies like Uber and Airbnb, like how those were implemented in Chicago. But I guess it's the implication that like these, like, again, these companies are operating on a level that's completely disconnected from the neighborhoods they exist in. These drones, these delivery robots, these autonomous vehicles, right? They'll be in service of us in some form or fashion to get our packages to us. But the idea that there are more physical manifestations of like sort of wiping out swaths of labor in the city is, again, at the behest of others. Yeah, my relationship to taxis, I took them, but I was like, there's a more convenient way to do this. And it doesn't look entirely different. There's the Airbnb, it's different, but it's like, I'm going somewhere to stay. I'm getting in somebody's car to go somewhere. Like, but the idea, I'm like, this.
But how much of that is just because you were younger then?
It's a very good point. It's a very good
I think
point.
about that a lot of like, how much did I accept of the ways that tech companies like changed my very being just because I was sort of younger and my brain was more flexible. You know what I mean? Whereas now I am older and my brain is less flexible. I don't know.
But the idea of just the cars and the delivery drones and the delivery robots just sort of all on their own internal network around the city, sharing sidewalk
and wait till they start
space
talking
and
to
road
each other.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that, you know. Yeah.
But that's the price of convenience, Jacoby.
I start losing all logic and start getting real
Conspiracy minded.
conspiratorial. I feel like we're going to be talking about this a lot this year.
Yeah.
We've already made it clear. This is going to be in the conversation a lot. But again, I want to give you a huge thank you for making time today. Our executive producer, Simone Alicea.
Hey, thanks, Jacoby.
You know, we can't close this thing down without some good news. I just wanted to shout out a couple of events I'm excited for this week, including all of the people behind Farm Dega and Monday Coffee. You can pop over to their spot in North Lawndale this morning from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. where they're going to be free food and produce for the community, hot coffee, and kitchen items. I also wanted to put the 312 All-Star Basketball Tournament, which is going down at Ogden Park in Inglewood this Saturday, on your radar, in addition to a winter walk you can take outside at Burns Park in South Deering. They're gonna have a bonfire. They're gonna be out there doing some bird walking. Now, if you want to stay indoors on Saturday, you ain't trying to pop out to the park, then go ahead and check out Women in Dance Festival. It's going down up in Andersonville. I'll drop a link for you in the show notes in celebration of Women's History Month. As always, I appreciate y'all for listening and reading. We're gonna be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.